Hey, Peter, Blake, Thomas, Kara. And did we get Kurt's name changed? I'm looking to see if he got that through the system. Hey, Mark. Hey, Michael, Alvaro, Frederick. Hey, Sonny, Errol. All right, guys. So, how's things going? Give me a shout out. Let me know. Are things going good? You guys in need of anything? Would also love to know how those hangouts are going, the breakout sessions. See if those are really working out. Hey, Michael, behind schedule is fine. I'm gonna start recording now. If anybody else wants to start recording, that's good. We're just having an informal chat right now. Thomas thinks breakout should be questions and demoing. Noted. Mark, thanks for your comment. Serious answers are always the way we want to go. Okay, thanks, Kurt. Omar, full-time job in kids? I understand that. I got a full-time job in kids. So much work. Yeah, tons. The breakout is too fast for you to follow, Michael. Okay, so a little simpler in the demos. Got another idea for you guys, because what we observed, what we were observing last week, the thing that really started to hit home, was that Hangouts are kind of a entry level. They're how do I say it? They're a window into the community of you guys. And so in some ways, we may be trying to get too many things through a Hangout. Like a Hangout is a window in time. It's also a window into your computer, our computer, and it's a window into, you know, everybody, that 8 or I think 13 people at a time. So I'm looking at other avenues. One of them that I think we're going to start experimenting with is, since you have to sign up for Gmail for the Hangouts, we might just open up private Gmail communities. That way everybody can share stuff inside there. That's in lieu, of course, of us building our own, which is fraught with problems. I know that because I've built at least 4 communities at this point. All right, just reading the questions. Baruz, congrats, relocating to San Francisco. To Activision? That is awesome. As a material artist. Yeah, that is great news. Congrats. We'll Facebook ya. Tell the world. Israel's asking for recordings of breakouts. And as mentioned last time, there is definitely supposed to be recordings of breakouts. Breakout demos, sorry. Not the breakout sessions. Breakouts are too informal. And I love making this as easy as possible for you guys, but that's a lot. I mean, we would have to compromise on less breakouts and force more people into them, which you can't really do, just so that we could record them and make them available. It's overhead that's actually too expensive. Gilong, that Axe demo is off of my account. That was a mistake. We'll work that out today. Make sure you guys get the link. I'll probably just put it back on the account for the moment. Matthew, tests aren't ready yet. You should have one test already. The next one's going to come after week 5, which is this week. Okay, so that done and said, I need to do a couple more administrative things. We're 6 minutes in. Thanks for getting back to me and let me know how things are going so far. But now I want to check in with you guys in terms of how you want to be using ZBrush. See if that's going to affect what we cover from this point forward at all. So give me a shout out. How many people are interested in character, game work? How much are interested in environment game work? How much are interested in toy industry? Or just doing their own thing? Just learning for the fun of it. I'm looking through here. A lot of games, a lot of character and environment. Okay, hold on one sec. I gotta take my mic off. I'll be right back. I'm seeing 3D printing coming up quite a bit in toy manufacturing. That's good. Industrial design. Illustration. Okay. What do we got in here? All right, 50. Oops. Okay, that fills out pretty much along the lines. There is game environment, characters, which is a mix of anatomy and hard surface stuff. And then there's toys, which is also 3D printing and also jewelry at that point. And desktop manufacturing. So those are two categories really. I would say VFX for character and environments, and then the other one for toy industry and manufacturing. Actually, is what we should call that one. Industrial design and 3D printing. Man, I'm so looking forward to when that gets a little bit more advanced. Okay, another question. We are looking to make a change to the system. So does anybody here have a problem with the projects that they share, the projects at the certification page, with those being viewable to the public? I was thinking that it would be a fantastic way to tell people what people do in a class. Like, for example, Chris Costa's. If you could see the work being done in there, you know, under the character work, it's just amazing. So it was the same with the game art stuff, environment, and the stuff with Joseph Drust. And so I really want a way to get what the students are doing out into the public. But then also I started thinking that these are there's something we can do here. We can make these a calling card for people if we can get the interface right. Like a LinkedIn with your projects in it. So there are some people that would like to keep it private, but the bulk of us are now Facebook generation, and nothing is private. So that's fine. That's what we'll do. We'll just have an optional privacy button with a default of things being public, and then we'll have easy tools to make it private. Rafi, your point's absolutely right. One of the things that I think is really important is putting some pressure on ourselves to make, better and better projects. It can't be too much pressure that we don't do the work, but it has to be just a little bit of pressure. Okay. All right, so that's answered. Now, that's about 10, 11 minutes into it. Let's get into what we're going to talk about today. So today is really all about panel loops, in a sense. And you've already seen, I hope, the demonstration from class on that. There's been a few changes in this version versus the one that you saw that some of the lectures were done in. Mostly in the sense of what you could do when a model was partially visible. So there's a lot more that you can do when a model's partially visible now. So I'm not going to get in and cover the exact differences. I'm just going to jump in and start working. Okay. Alrighty. Oh, feedback for the public. That's something. I wonder how that would work. All right, we'll figure that out. Okay, so panel loops. Let's just talk a little bit about this idea of panel loops. And in fact, why don't we open this up so we can talk a little bit of the structure, really. So we're talking, as I said, panel loops. And you'll notice in the interface there is an edge loop, there is a groups loops, and there is a panel loops. And then below that, there are tools down here to work your loops. So basically, the way this system works, the main element, the main two elements really are there's a user side and there's a ZBrush side. You could say that the user side is polygroups. The ZBrush side is both groups plus loops. Okay, and I bring it up like this because I was just thinking about it today, and it occurred to me that loops, this idea of loops, which is really just the topology as it flows across the surface, right? These are mathematically trackable items. This is something that exists in space that ZBrush can perform operations on. And I'll give you a really simple example using these guys down here. So if we come in here, we look at the model, we're going to do just a little bit of sculpting. Okay. There you go. Some crazy topology, some chatter on the sides, and it doesn't flow very well. Well, what ZBrush is trying to do now with this Z-remesher approach and with automated topology is it's trying to develop technology. Now remember, these features that you see here, like this feature panel loops, is that something that you think, is that an end product for Pixologic? Let me say it like that. Do you think that's what Pixologic is doing, is developing panel loops and Dynamesh and different features like that? These are byproducts of something else that Pixologic is doing. These are byproducts of panel loops, for example, is a byproduct of Ofer Alon going in there and trying to automate topology. It's just one byproduct of automating topology. The other product was Shadowbox, Dynamesh, and Z-spheres. That was another product where Ofer was trying to automate topology. So back in ZBrush 2 days, all we had was Z-spheres. Those are pretty advanced. They're still really advanced. But they were a little cumbersome in their entry point. They were a little harder to make. And so the dev guys got together and they're thinking, what is it that we need to do from an artist perspective? What is, as they say in consulting speak, what are your pain points? I love that. What are my pain points? Let me tell you what my pain points are. give me a big sheet. Give me a notepad, please, and in a couple of hours. What are an artist's pain points? Well, if an artist wants to just get in there and start to create, which is the thing that is foremost on Pixologic's mind. How do we get an artist to just walk into ZBrush, pick up a brush, and just start to go crazy? One of the things that you can see in the topology that's underneath here, and you can see in the chattering, is that topology of the model affects the sculpting. Okay, and as soon as the topology affects the sculpting, then that affects your expectations out of ZBrush. And that's a big deal. Because I don't know how many people here were using ZBrush back in the ZBrush 2 days. Once. When I first started using ZBrush 2, it was just a little bit after ZBrush 2 was released. It was known for being this software program where you could sculpt these really muddy figures. Everything was muddy and loose and unrefined, and it was really hard. So ZBrush was known for these blobby figures. There's other software out there that's known for blobby figures too. But that blobby figures was a part of the expectation. And so the dev team learned pretty early on that blobby figures was only going to get them so far. They needed to take control of that entire set of expectations. And I know it sounds like I'm giving this kind of odd, how do I say it, lecture on what Pixologic was thinking, but I can tell you that I was there shortly after ZBrush 2 was released. This is the conversation we had. It's not a made-up conversation after the fact. This is the exact conversation we had. And many of them follow these exact lines of how do we get the artist to be able to create and to feel like they're creating. That kind of will go to, if you're ever teaching ZBrush, you're demoing it, or you're ever talking about it, that's part of the whole certification thing, is really want to loop you guys in on the conversations that I had when I was there. It is all about managing this expectation and putting features in or working to solve the artist's pain points. Okay, so one of the first things they do is they start to develop tools. I'm going to delete lower here. Tools that allow them to interact with the model in a certain way. So let's just take, for example, this delete loops. What does delete loops do? Well, it analyzes the entire surface using this angle setting here. Anything that was within its tolerances, then it would keep. But anything that was kind of outside of its tolerances, then it would start chucking the topology. So for example, it chucked all of these topology lines because they did not commit enough of a curve for them to be warranted anymore. But then as soon as we got to this angle, which is more, this guy right here, as soon as we got to this angle, then we knew, okay, we needed a topology line to cover that. And so we put a topology line in there. In a sense, it's an automated topology, but it's not, because it is literally analyzing every single loop and defining which loops need to stay and which ones need to go. So it's a simple algorithm that just defines the loops based on this angle parameter and saying, okay, does loop 036 change the form enough according to angle to still be in existence? In, let's say if this is loop 365 and then this is loop 365, 6, and 3, 6, 7. Obviously, those guys went, but then 3, 6, 5 stayed. And I'm talking to you in these terms because this is how these features get developed. That's how they get outlined. One of the first things that would have came about is this idea of delete loops. Let's just analyze all the edge loops inside of some kind of model and see if we can actually create a feature that will keep the overall form, keep the overall form but have less geometry. Those are pretty close to each other when you zoom out. They're really close to each other. Now the other thing that they've done is they come down here to this align, to this delete loops, and they're like, well, I can delete loops, right? We've written that routine. That is just a routine that can be called inside C++ or whatever this thing gets programmed in, and it's done. Now the next thing we can do is see if we can get similar functionality through slightly different methods. So they want to use the same thing where they simplify the surface a little bit. But in this case, they're not going to delete the loops. They're going to move them. So delete loops deleted the loops. Align loops could have been called move loops. But that wouldn't have sounded very good. I agree. Align loops is a much better option. But what I want you to do is think about these guys as though they are routines, computer routines. And if you've had experience writing scripting or anything like that, you've probably had to write little subroutines, little tiny things that exist independent of your main program. That's what these guys are. And they form the foundation of what goes above it. Let me check in with you guys. Steven's asking, how does align loops choose to move them? Well, that's part of the routine. So, of course, what it's doing is it's going through and it's analyzing this loop. Let's say that's loop 366, and it says to that it has one routine that says, or one pass through the routine that says, this loop does not. How do I say this? This loop does not affect form enough, right? So we know that because first part is does not affect form enough. Delete loops would then have just deleted it. Align loops does something else. It stores it over here in this in this memory block A, and then it loops through all the loops and says, this doesn't conform, doesn't conform, doesn't conform, da 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 da. And then there's this whole separate part of the routine that will then analyze what delete loops would do, and then simply interpolates out a straight plane and moves those loops into place. That might all sound a little confusing, or it might be terribly simple for some of you. But the ability to delete loops is actually relatively simple. The ability to move them, on the other hand, that's pretty powerful. Because if you can move a loop, that means that you can place a totally arbitrary loop somewhere. You have a technology that will place an arbitrary loop somewhere according to whatever you decide. So this is where panel loops comes in, and now we know that there's going to be some kind of group on the side, and panel loops will place an edge loop, an arbitrary edge loop, along that using the technology that's developed in align loops. I'm checking questions right now. Keith, not sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Too much gaming industry concern. Let me know what you mean. Joshua, I don't think you're going to integrate align loops or delete loops into your workflows very much. That's actually one of the reasons why I really wanted to show you, is you're not really going to see a tutorial that talks a lot about delete loops or line loops, because really at the end of the day you're going to use ZRemesher, or you're going to use Dynamesh. What's really cool about this is that this delete loops and align loops is a window into this whole edge loop system. That kind of, it's almost like a code level window. Wow, hey, they got a delete loops code routine. They got a move loops routine. So Joshua, you're not going to integrate these two terribly much. And John is saying delete is a calculation, move is a form of AI. I wouldn't disagree with that. Mark, moving loops does not alter the vertex order. And what Mark is referring to is that this little vertice right here, if you save that as an OBJ file and look at that OBJ file in a word editor, you will see a series of lines that start with V. It would be V, V, V. There's also, I've forgotten all the rest of them, but they're pretty straightforward symbols for the different parts: polygon faces, the edges, the vertexes. So in the vertex, they'll have something, and then there'll be a number, and then another series of numbers that generally correspond to location and things like that. This is a gross simplification because I don't have an OBJ file in front of me. But in this particular case, in this OBJ, this might be called vertex 769543, right? One of the problems that used to happen, and this is the reason why I'm even talking about this, is that certain actions inside of ZBrush would change this vertice from 769543 to a totally different number. And if that ever happens, what's the problem? Anybody want to volunteer? What's the problem with vert orders changing? Yeah, morph targets. Morph targets are the big issue. Means that if you're taking this model into Maya, or you're comparing it, or you're using it to influence the model inside of Maya or Max or XSI, the way that they would connect to each other is Maya would look for this vertice and say, oh, you're over here. But instead, that vertice would now be, you know, something way on the other side, and then all kinds of craziness happens. So vert order is one of those inviolable laws where once it's changed, you're in a different world, and you do not want that to happen. Vert order should never change. And now technically ZBrush should never change vert order ever. It should always take in and put out exactly what it's got. Hope that answers your question, Mark. Thanks for asking that. Okay. All right, cool. So we've got this little window down here, which is pretty neat. You know, and there's some features like aspect ratio, you know, and feel free to dive into all of these individual features. But you can pretty much guess what this is. You know, talking about, well, let me see if I can highlight. I'm not sure I can. Yay, I can. See where it says, defines the maximum relative width and height ratio. So that's helping to define, you know, does it allow for a polygon to stretch like that, or is it going to force a polygon to be much more square? Okay, let's undo that. It's pretty neat. Align loops, pretty cool. You could do that, but as you'll see later, and as you may have already experimented, if you do ZRemesher, you're going to get better results all the way around. Let's lower that polygon count. Where are we at right now? We're at 24. So I'm going to go half. Let's just do that. There you go. And then you can
ZRemesh and ZRemesh. It's not a one-stop shop. You can do that multiple times. And that's a much cleaner edge. Of course, we lost our hard edge, but there are other ways to get that back. Cool. I'm going through here. Can ZRemesher work on individual polygroups on a single subtool? Thomas, I highly recommend checking that out. Just try it. Partial mesh. And what do you know, it works. That was one of the things that they changed in this newest version. They allowed partial visibility to do a lot more than it was doing before. Okay, let me get it back to that seat. Thanks. Steve, will we be talking about ways to get the hard edge back? Since I just brought this up, guys, I think I kind of want to bring it up now because I'm not sure I talk about that later. And every time I say I will talk about it later, I do not. So if you don't mind, let's do one. Let's look at this and how I can keep this hard edge. This is a very unsexy example, but it'll be very easy for you to duplicate. So I want to take just a moment and show you how you can keep your edge, or how you can get it back. So the way this normally would work, the simplest way, is you duplicate your model so that you have one that has the exact shape and form and everything that you need. Okay, and then you start working and modifying another one. So let's say in this case we come in, let's say edge loop, we know we can say delete edges. I'm going to press solo mode here. We can do delete edges and it will maintain hard edges. It's designed to do that, you know. It keeps 3 edge loops right there because it's designed as an algorithm to find the hard edges and really only keep things that relate to hard edges or form. But if that's not what we do and we do something like ZRemesher and we go half, takes a moment. And we go half again. Okay, good edge loops. We're going to go half again. And I'm going to go half again. There you go. Super soft, right? Don't have that hard edge, nothing like it. And this model may or may not be able to keep those edges. I don't know. What we can do is just go into subtools and then we go into project. And let's just project all. Let's turn solo off. There we go. And then solo back on. Doesn't seem to have minded it. Let's divide this model once, twice, and then do project again. Okay. Turn symmetry on and we can smooth these things out a little. And we can go project. And let's just turn that off. And let's go project. There you go. All right. So now you can use H, polish, smooth these guys, and then put that back in. So that was a real quick 5-minute demonstration. If you're doing things like, you know, delete loops or ZRemesher and you're taking it to a low level, you would want to just split these out into two objects. And with two objects on, you can always use the projection inside subtools. It's been around for a while, but it's very, very powerful. There is also, let me see if I can undo. There is also, of course, if you put solo on, there's the ZProject brush right here. ZProject is pretty cool. You just want to turn RGB off, and you press Alt, and then let go of Alt. And you don't want to do it with symmetry on. I had symmetry on, and maybe we'll have a problem, maybe not. Alt. Okay. Go into solo mode. We were able to pick some of that up. Let's divide this, back out of solo mode, and I'm just going to focus on this area right here, pressing Alt. And then I'll get that area right in the back into solo mode. And you can see I was able to project one model into the other using that ZProject brush. The ZProject brush, though, guys, is it's basically your eye, it's your line of sight. It's from the front of the canvas to the back. That's why it's Z. It's just the Z of the canvas. Excuse me. I'm looking through here. Fred, how was I able to select just part of the model to Z-remesh? That's something we are going to do a lot of today. It is just Control-Shift. Control-Shift. And then Control-Shift-Click to show the whole thing. Okay, going through the questions. Thomas, not understanding what project does. Well, it's really just a shrink wrap. You are projecting, like you project an image from one surface to another surface, from one object to a wall. Well, in this case, you're projecting the sculpt from one object to another object. You could also call it transfer. You could also call it shrink wrap. So you shrink wrap one model to the other model. Those terms are all usable. Keith is asking, when is it best to Dynamesh a model versus Z-remesh? And that's actually really easy, although there are some modifications to the general process. There's some, how do I say, there's some personal variables there. But Dynamesh, we haven't spent a lot of time on that here, but Dynamesh is really for the initial sketching. Dynamesh is designed to be turned on and then turned off. It's designed to help you generate a model, and when you have generated that model, you turn it off, and then you divide that model and go from there. So it's not something that's designed to be on. Z-remesher, as you'll see in the lectures about that, I think next week or so. This is designed mostly for getting it out. This is for animation or something along those lines. I'm not saying Z-remesher is perfect animation. Topology, if somebody developed that today, in today's world with today's technology and today's processors, then that would be one heck of a job. Edge weighting, interesting. Let's see. Is it a cage that creates a mold? Thomas, it's not a cage, not a mold. I mean, it's really just the best way is to think of it as shrink wrapping. Chris, have I helped understand your your questions with project? Reading through questions. Okay, did I help with the, Rafi, did I help with the Z-remesher and Dynamesh thing? Project is under subtool, yes, Cara, thanks. Thank you so much. How are things going, by the way? This lesson today has been the most valuable one in the whole course. Wow, thank you, Mark. I'm appealing to your programmer mind, I think. Stephen, project. Does that mean that you should stick to doing it from the center? Yes. The answer is yes. Anything that you do on the sides here is going to be usually pretty bad. So I can demo that pretty fast. Let's just do it like this. I'm going to mess this up a little bit, and that way I have to really project. Okay. All right, I'm really just going along that edge, seeing if I can get into any trouble. Into solo mode, and there you go. That's what we call trouble. So stay away from the edges, and you'll be much better off. Thanks for asking that, Stephen. Yeah, definitely. Catherine's mentioning mouth and nose, which Z-remesh can complicate. Mark is asking, the order of subtools, is that relevant? I don't know. I'm going to move this one. It shouldn't, because what it's doing is it's using the canvas as an intermediary. And it doesn't. The order is irrelevant. Basically what ZBrush is doing, because subtools don't talk to each other, remember? So if subtools don't talk to each other, how is ZBrush able to get these guys to talk to each other? Well, it's basically using something like Projection Master, where it's using the Canvas's 2.5D technology, which is very old at this point, and it's using that to help you transfer details from one to another. You could almost look at projection down here as an advanced Projection Master. Haven't thought about it that way, but it's not exactly straightforward. Projection Master allows you to do other things. Oh, lots of questions here. All right, good. I'm glad we're taking this time then. Peter, Z-remesh is more clean topology. It should replace topology tools. Peter, it is cleaner topology, but remember, this is cutting edge. I mean, seriously, cutting edge. Z-remesher, there is not another tool that works like this one does at that speed by, I think, anybody. I could be wrong and in my own bubble, but as of the time that I'm saying this, this is some of the most cutting edge math being done in CG, you know, with that level of speed. So as a cutting edge tool, it may eventually eclipse other things, but not right away. And Jim is asking, how would you make a sharp, crisp edge? And I think you're referring to this very unsexy example. Just how do I get a clean edge in there? And if you are, you use the projection, but then at a certain point, you just have to manually sculpt. The projection will get you so far, and then you touch it up via sculpting. What I used to tell people is you want projection to do 80% of the job, but if you ask projection to do that remaining 20%, the remaining fixes of that hard edge here and that little divot over there, if you ask projection to do that, you will spend 80% of your time, of your entire project's time, on that tiny 20%. It is not worth it. Just get in there and use the sculpting tools. That's when you got to do manual. It is not designed 100% to solve all problems. Kurt, project equals detail shapes transferred. Yes, good. Cool. Riley, kind of works, but using another, yes. Riley's saying that it's like using the morph brush, but a subtool instead. Thomas is asking, how many polys would he keep using Dynamesh? And I don't want to think in terms of polys. And Pixologic would not want you to think in terms of polys. What they would want you to think in terms of is shape. So if you're sculpting a blob, you don't need a lot to represent that. But when you sculpt a human, the single biggest defining element that you're going to have to deal with is when it comes down into this hand and you start dealing with, fingers and the separation of those fingers. That's going to be what drives your polygon count. So don't think about it in terms of, some arbitrary limit, like don't go above 100,000 polygons. Never, ever, ever, ever. It just doesn't work like that. You just need enough polygons to be able to, in a character, put fingers in. And, that might be 100,000. It's a lot. So fingers are the hard part. Stephen is asking, in Dynamesh, what does resolution correspond to? It's so arbitrary, but I'm checking here in case they've upgraded this. 1024, all details as you remesh. There is no direct corollary. And there is some adapting that happens here. So I can't really tell you what does 128 mean. It's like unified skin down here, resolution. That might have had some corollary. Remember the box, right? ZBrush is working within a contained ZBrush unit. And then all of these little ZBrush cubes are all sitting in there in that space. How many across does 128? Is that 128 going across? I couldn't really tell you, and I don't think they would let me know that right off the bat. Okay, a lot of questions, so I'm just going through here, and I am behind. Georgie, shrink wrapping with projection will subtract and pull forward. I wouldn't say add, but it will push back and pull forward. I'm going to ask, I think Nate is in here, but he may have went into a breakout session. So, Kevin, if you can help Fred with project, that'd be great. You guys can just carry on a conversation. I'll see if I can pick that up.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Mark, you're asking, if order is irrelevant in a subtool, how do you know which one to project to? Well, I think you might be thinking about this a little bit abstractly. So when you're in practice and you're actually projecting one model to another, and let's just get an example here. Solo mode off. And let's get shirt. Okay. So I got the shirt on, I got this guy on, and I'm going to divide that shirt. If we wanted this shirt to shrink wrap to his body, well, we know pretty clear what we want. We know we want the shirt to project to the body. If I had 15 subtools and some of them were in the way, like this vest, I would simply turn it off. Just turn it off. It's all about just what's in front of you. There's not some big long programmatic process and some kind of node chain you got to build. Says we're going to project shirt onto demo soldier. We're going to do it in area X by placing a mask, and then we're going to click a button that says project now. That's a Maya process, and that's way too complicated. This is just, if you want to project the shirt and the body, turn everything else off. And Scott, you can only work on one subtool, right? So he's asking which subtool is affected. So if I want to, let's say, project the demo soldier's pectoralis into the shirt, which one is going to be my active subtool? Your active subtool is going to be the shirt, because that's the one you're putting sculpting detail into. Okay. Jorge, you had it right. Okay, could you not use edge loops? Okay, looks like we've moved away from that. So good. Let me come back to something Thomas is asking. Thomas wants to know more about how this eye things work. He feels like they're a little wonky. I'm not going to disagree with you there, Thomas. There is some wonkiness to it. So if you wanted to hide and show all subtools, you have to click the eye icon of your selected one. Whichever subtool is selected. You can just click the eye icon, it'll turn them off and on. And then you can turn them off individually. Sometimes you'll accidentally select a subtool. That's where the real wonkiness comes in. I accidentally clicked kind of up towards the top of that eye icon, and there's like a 1 pixel boundary there where you can accidentally select the model as opposed to the eye icon. That's not very nice. That's a little unfriendly that way. So let me see if I can duplicate that. So there we go. Yeah, there we go. It's like 1 tiny pixel, but you can see how repeatable it is. Okay, got a ton of questions here, guys, so I'm sorry I'm behind from when you're posting. Mark, you're asking about could you not use edge loops? And I think you might have been referring to something a bit ago, but I've lost track. So I'm going to skip through, but if you can give me more detail on that, then I'll catch it in the end. Keith, would it be easier to mask off area, create a polygroup, and use polygroups to create edges? Again, I'm not sure which one you're referring to. But if you can relate that to something, then I can maybe answer that again. Thomas, is ZRemesher the go-to tool for dumbing down art to create paper arts, fold-outs into UVs? I don't know. I'd love to see that. Hope you guys saw Thomas's question. That looks pretty fun. I've looked at paper art. I think it would take more than I don't know if an algorithm can do that. It would be an awesome algorithm. I would be in awe of. I know an algorithm can do it. Let me say it that way. I don't know if I haven't seen one that does it. Kurt, does it make a difference what order subtools are in when using projection? No, it does not. It uses the canvas. So the canvas this area is simply going to, it's going to be what it is. So again, if I want the shirt, it's going to project what's on the canvas onto the shirt, and in this case the canvas is representing the body. If the vest is on there, then the shirt is going to get the body. See? Matthew is going back to the resolution idea, and yeah, it is, but the problem is what's the size of that box that the model's getting projected into? When you're using project or Dynamesh, is the box that says 128 this size, is the box 128 this size, or is the box automatically conformed to the entire size of the model, and now it's 128? Most likely it's one ZBrush unit, and then that's simply repeated. It's just a box that repeats and repeats. Omar, Dynamesh and ZRemesher? No. OBJs, you can use them on OBJs, no issue there. Thomas, also if subtools are bugging you, then we want to solve it, we want to get it, but really my priority for you is to understand the brushes, because once you get subtools, you'll have subtools. Once you just get over that interface and that whatever confusion's happening. But you need the mileage sculpting. Michael is right, it is best to create polygroups at the lowest level. And let me make sure I show you that. So grouped at lowest level. I'll get to show you some of the ways ZBrush thinks there. Okay, almost done with the questions. Georgie, so if more than one subtool are visible, does it project all of them on the active subtool? And yes, it does. Rick, did that example I did earlier satisfy? Kevin, okay. Steven, that one pixel in the subtool, yeah, it gets me all the time. Oh, Mark is saying back to this example. I think I like what Mark was saying. So let's come back to this example real quick. And I'm going to go back there to the very beginning, to this sculpt. So Mark was saying we could use ZRemesher a few times and then come back into edge loops and use delete loops to get hard edges. Kind of neat idea. This is a ZBrusher thinking here. ZBrush or ZRemesher. So our goal is to get better topology, lower the polygon count, and keep some hard edges. Third time I'm doing this. Fourth time I'm doing this. And now let's go into edge loop. And let's just say delete loops. It's not wanting to delete loops. Okay. If that ever happens, where it's just not functioning, the trick, and please make sure you note this because this is a trick that solves a lot of problems. Let me take a drink of chai. The trick is export it. Let's just export it to the desktop and call it polysphere. Okay. Then you select a polymesh 3D. This is like a this is just an empty object. It's an empty node that you import stuff into. But if you import it into that, then you'll be in great shape. Okay, there you go. And let's try it now. Still not wanting to. Anybody want to take a guess on why? Let me go through the rest of them. Yeah, it could be already optimized, but it should still. But maybe that's as best as it can do. I don't know. That's a little weird to me. Thomas, I'll check that out. Damon is asking about insert mesh brushes. You're saying some of them are half? Not sure what you mean by half, unless you're talking about this H cube and H cylinder. And that's mostly because if you just want to add something to the surface and you don't want it to penetrate below the surface, then you might want just a half. The other reason why is the half gets used, and in fact this is actually the real reason why, now that I remember. The real reason why is when you use replacement mesh. I'm going to write that. We may cover that, but it's actually supposed to be next week. Replacement mesh requires you to have an open hole in a model and then some part that has an open hole to it. And then it simply bridges the space between them. So that's actually why they have half. So what does distance, PA, blur, project shell, what's all that do in projection? I think you're referring to right in here. Let's see, let's get the name. Project all blur, project shell, mean, distance. So I might as well talk a little bit about that. Remember, any calculation that you do inside of ZBrush, or any calculation you have to do anywhere really, it has to have a range of activity. If I'm using my brush has this outer limit, basically the brush size. Nothing outside of that brush is part of the calculation. The only things that are part of the calculation are what are inside that brush. So there's a limited sphere in which ZBrush is calculating some effect, in this case project. Again, if it's outside that sphere, it doesn't get projected. So when you use something like project, you have to tell ZBrush how far out and how far in are you going to search for geometry. So distance refers really to how far out. If I remember correctly, it's referring to how far out ZBrush is going to search in this project all. So let's just do project right now, and I'm going to turn the body off because that vest is the best example. Okay, go into solo mode. Okay. Did good, did good, did good, did good. Oh, something happened. Something happened. Okay, undo. Let's increase distance. 0.1. Project all. G. Oh, that's great. We fixed it, sort of, but what happened here? Looks like the stuff that was on this side is now looking out and interpenetrating. So that's a problem, right? You don't want that. So you have to keep this kind of relatively low, but then you have that problem where it doesn't show up all the time. So one of the other ways that you solve that is with this project shell. Project shell is another way of using distance, but distance looks straight out. Project shell attempts to just do it a little bit differently, where you get a nice visual there, and you can kind of see when you're going to run into problems there. Project shell is 0.1. Project all, go into solo mode. Didn't really work. Not as well as I would have liked, but using just project shell, we can make that happen. Let's just come in and go all the way and encompass the entire thing, and now we project all, and there. What? Okay. Let's set that back to 0. Mean. What does mean mean? This is really just part of the algorithm. Okay, just trying to help understand how, which vertices and how it's going to move them. PA blur project all. And this is just a normal part of an algorithm. You'll see this in a lot of things in projection. Let me see if there's one in clay polish. Yeah, there's a softness and a sharpness, softness in there. There's a bunch of these guys. There's a contrast and an edge contrast, which is sort of along the lines of what we're doing here with a blur. But a blur is just helping the math, keeping things, how it's moving the surface, how it's going to adjust it and move it, and how it's going to do its calculation. Is it going to project every tiny little single crazy shape that's happening there, or is it going to simplify some of that? And so usually you have project on, it go blur on, it goes a little bit, I'm not going to say it goes faster, but it's just going to go smoother. Technically, blur can increase your calculation times. All right, so I stepped away from chat and Chris is asking, if Dynamesh gives us more topology, why use divide? What's the difference? Chris, what's the difference between what? Topology and divide? Or Dynamesh and ZRemesher? Giling is asking, in the documentation, in the lectures, I should have shown you how I do this using mesh extraction. Make sure to check out those lectures. Pretty sure that I demoed that. Thomas, you're getting into rendering, and we're having problems with subtools. I need you to focus, Thomas. Okay, can't take everything all at once, and you got to go slowly. Otherwise, it's going to be very painful because there are a lot of distractions in this program. Catherine, can you delete loops in one polygroup and not another? I don't know. I'm going to leave that for you, Catherine. Let me know. Give it a quick try. I'm going to get behind in all these questions. We're going to be here until midnight. But let me know if you can partial mesh visibility, if you can still use delete loops. That would be pretty neat. Steve, we'll do drawn curves with ZRemesher when we do ZRemesher, which we do. There is a lecture on that, and I've got a ton of content on it. Okay, already optimized. All right, that shows you how far behind I am on these questions. Is Dynamesh preventing me from delete loops? I'm going to check something. It's not on, okay. Okay, Thomas, I created a lot of gaps in panel loops. How do I recover my art into a solid tool? Okay, hold on one sec. Today is panel loops, so we'll see if we can get there. Double-sided shell. Blur is kind of like a polish. Stephen, masking should affect projectile. Should. Masking, Keith's asking about masking and extracting versus projection. Hey Mark, have a good one. Okay. Explain masking and extracting versus projection. All right, well now I think, what are we, an hour in? Now we are, I hope, going to get to the projection side of things. So, keep the questions coming. I'm going to jump on and let's start using panel loops. So we talked about how loops seems to be, if you go down to geometry, seems to be this element that Pixologic is developing tools around, because ZBrush can analyze loops, find loops, and do things with loops. And as it goes through, it's going to be doing more and more. It can move them, it can delete them, it can place them in locations. There's some people have brought up the here this stroke curve function. Frame mesh actually creates loops using the curve tool, so to speak. But the other part of this equation is the groups. So we need to get comfortable with groups. And I'm just going to, well, I'm going to go to this polysphere and back to the origins. So I have a simple polysphere, and I'm just going to go over some group stuff that you probably already know, but let's just go over it and get ourselves familiar with a couple of the stray concepts. So one of the first things that we need to know about grouping is really just that the main category. So there is auto group, there is UV group, and there is group visible. Those are the original features. The rest of these have been largely added. Group masked was added afterwards. Group front was added recently along with group by normals and merge. And then group is Dynamesh. That didn't come around until Dynamesh was there. These guys, poly, paint, and masking, those have been around for a long time too. In fact, we can do those in red. So red is number 1, number 2, and number 3. Oops, it's a really big size pen. Auto groups, let's just be clear on what auto groups does. Auto groups will simply group all separated poly shells. So you can really see that if we go and merge this guy, let's just go and merge, I'm going to say merge visible, so that he's one subtool, right? One big subtool. I go to groups, I can go into group visible, and it will group everything that is visible as one object, and then I can auto group, and everything that is a separated piece that isn't geometrically separate, which means that they have no vertices or edges connecting them, then they get their own group. You can sometimes use this merge similar groups when you need to do things like match a knee pad from left to right, because as you can see, auto groups does not care about left right, but merge similar groups will look and you'll say, hey, you've got, let's say you've got 5 polys, you've got 5 polys, you're roughly the same shape, you've got 10, you got 10, roughly the same shape, you know, let's be friends. 3, 3, and then they just get grouped together. Cool. So that's what auto groups does. Group visible, or I'm sorry, I should come over here to group UV. UV groups What is UV groups? UV groups, if I remember correctly, is coming from a long time ago. Let me just double check, see if they're still the same thing. Should be that UV groups, let me demonstrate this. Inside of, let's say, Maya or Max, you'll have a 0 to 1 UV range, or I should say 0 is down here. Right? And this is V and this is U. And inside of Maya, this is the area that you see. But you can expand that so that you see areas outside of it. And UV groups was created around the time of the ZBrush 2, largely to help people as an organizational tool when they were exporting displacement maps, things of that nature. Because they could put their face UV here, and then they could put their arm UV here with those crazy flappy things that arms do. And then they could put their boots and their jacket and their props over there, and then those were all separated pieces. You could hide that and then extract a displacement map, so to speak. Then came along, where did it go? Multi-map exporter. That was designed to work along similar lines and to allow people to export. But there are a lot of ways to handle that kind of stuff now. So UV groups doesn't get used a lot. You're going to use auto groups and you're going to use group visible a whole lot. Let me check in. Okay. Yes, okay, good. All right, now the selection process, actually probably the one that's the most important, I would say, is this masking. So let's turn symmetry on. This guy and then group masked. This makes a really big difference in life. But a lot of times, because these groups are kind of a little on the iffy, a lot of people will end up using the edge loop masked border instead. It's not supported with multiple subdivision levels though, so that's problematic. Notice how its behavior is different. If something is intersecting, then it splits that into two different groups. You'll see this is actually going to be quite useful for us a little bit later. And you can get a lot of complexity this way. This is not the way this functioned. Polygroups, group masked. Group mask will overwrite the entire area and says, hey, I'm the group. If you come over here to edge loop masked border, then that says, you know, hey, we're all important. We're all these separated out pieces. And like I said, this becomes really useful later on. And that's the reason why this is the one that has a hotkey and the other one doesn't. Because later on we do things like, let's take the standard brush. Oh, it doesn't matter which brush. I'm going to press Control, and then I'm going to come into my alphas. Okay, I'm holding the Control button down right now. Notice I just let it go, and I went back to the standard and I lost my alpha. But I'm holding Control, and that means that the pen brush is active. Okay, and I gotta go in there and change the, oh, I got the wrong brush. I'm adjusting the stroke for the standard brush. Hold Control down to be able to adjust its brush stroke type. So let's go mask pen, drag rectangle, this alpha. I'm going to hold Control, and there you go. Let's see, do we need to increase the intensity? Does that make a difference? Kind of not, right? It's RGB intensity that makes a difference. We can lower that, and then we're in trouble. You can't even see that mask. Let's take it all the way back up. There you go. Control-Shift-E, and you got a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Okay, but in this particular case, it's a little hard to get what I want. And let me turn polyframe off. I'm going to come in here like this, yeah, and then let me go into stroke and see if that button is still there. Replay last. No, it's not really working with the mask brush. So you can try to duplicate that. Control-Shift-E, and you can get something. But this is really going to be useful when we come in here and we start going into panel loops. I'm not going to adjust anything right now. I'm just going to go in and check this out. I just pressed it, and now we got all these parts. Okay, let's increase that thickness. Whoa. There we go. There we go. There, that's a little bit nicer. So we have all these individual distinct elements, and these are technically, at this point, separated out pieces of geometry. I'm looking through the model right now. I can come into geometry, or I can go into polygroup, sorry, auto group, and that'll show you, this is its own distinct entity. It is a polygroup in and of itself, as is this tiny little thing right here. And this tiny little thing, it's a small deal right now, but these are going to become really useful when we get in and we start actually doing something. We start playing. This one difference of where the polygroup becomes dominant versus the polygroup breaks up into multiple shards, that one tiny difference is going to open up the potential for us to start to be creative with our panel groups. It was actually one of the key features for really making panel loops something that's just a fun thing to start to explore. So we've got these options, and these aren't the only things. Panel, let's go into polygroups and let's check. Let's see, we saw group visibility, we saw auto groups. There's this groups by normal thing. That's kind of interesting. So parts of the model that are facing different directions get, grouped, so to speak. Group front. Anything that's facing forward, and then anything is facing the back. So let's go group visible, and let's go group normal. I'm going to see if that actually functioned. I don't think it's working. I think group normal is kind of behaving like auto groups. So I'll have to show you that later. So auto groups, you're not going to use it a lot. You are going to use group visible. You are going to use not this, but the other one that is up in geometry. Groups normal, you're only going to use in very rare, very rare cases. And from poly paint, you are going to use that. When you get into the texturing side of things, you'll use that. But this from masking, this is not so relevant. This was originally what was there. Then it became group masked, and then we've got that beautiful edge loop, the group selection. Okay. Checking questions. Blake is asking, do I need more polys for a stronger mask? And I'm not sure what you mean by stronger mask, so let's go back before panel loops. Probably this case. Yes, in that sense, do I need more polygons to be able to get more of that detail in my mask? The answer would be yes, absolutely. And we can just divide it once, twice, 3 times. And you can see that right there. It's divided much more, so I see much more. Okay, just reading through the questions. Christopher, is there a maximum number of polygroups? I have not encountered a maximum. It is possible. I have not heard of one. Steve, let's see, group by normal. How does the max angle affect it? Let's take this backpack to illustrate. I'm going to go into solo mode, polygroup. So Steve was asking, how does max angle affect groups by normal? So really, it's going to be, the change. It's the angle of change. So this is pretty much not a 90, but maybe a 60-degree angle of change. Maybe 70. Probably 70 angle of change. So is that going to show up as a separate polygroup here and a separate polygroup here? Let's try it. That's lower. Oh, something's happening. Oh, something's happening. See, I think where it was getting confused is that it's really calculating, it may very well be calculating the normal from one side to the next, one row to the other. And so this is not a very strong change in plane. It's not necessarily averaging out the form per se. So I'm really lowering this. But in general, I would be hesitant, and I would always avoid thinking of these numbers in ZBrush as mathematical units. Like angle means 45, that means a 45-degree angle. I understand that that's the intuition, that's what we would normally do. We would normally think like, okay, let me set that to 30. But I would just caution. They are going to modify these numbers. If you ask them, they'll say, well, no, that's really 35 or that's really 40. But I've been doing this a little while. And I'm going to have to beg to differ. All right. So with this set at around 45 or 30 or whatever, then we were able to get this and this separated. If I start to lower this, let's set it to 15. Then we start to get some clear groupings. The side versus the side, versus the sides versus the back. We can set this to 16. We can set it to 18. And just try to find that point in which it works. That's pretty nice, I think. Hope that answers that, Steve. Riley, we're going to answer your question, but in short, you're asking what converted them into floating meshes, and that's panel loops. That's what this whole day is about. Geometry group selected mask mark does add geometry. It does, but this is when we start getting into this territory that I'm going down right now with you guys, where we're going to start to use panel loops as a design tool. Then you want to think about geometry as you're just throwing it away. That's all you're doing. You're putting some geometry in. It's going to look like crap, and who cares? That's why ZRemesher is there. That's why there are these other tools. But panel loops is going to give us an opportunity to design some crazy things with this fractured quality here. If you watch the lectures, which you need to do, there is a car example in there, and there's also an armor example as well, and there's, I think, like a circuit board example. Mark is asking, can you re-explain why polygroups are preferred over working with subtools? I think you're asking, why don't we use subtools to organize the mesh? Like, say, for example, this is all one subtool. Why are we using polygroups to work with the separated out parts? Why don't we just work with subtools, right? Tell me if I'm right there, and then I can answer that question. Mark. See, Mark, group normals would be useful in ArchViz. Yes, absolutely. Steve, I find it difficult to predict the results of the max angle. But yeah, okay, great. That's a very good point, Steve. It is difficult to predict the results, and that is, I'm hoping by now you're noticing that that is a common experience inside of ZBrush, where it is hard to kind of predict the result. And well, I know for the more engineering mindset side of us all, that can be kind of frustrating. I want you to think about that artist that hasn't quite joined the computer revolution yet. Think about that artist who's still working in clay, or still painting, and then remember your early times using the computer. Were you predicting exactly what was happening, or were you maybe in the category that I would call the clever monkey? You're just banging on the keyboard until Shakespeare comes, or you're just like, you try this, you try that. I'm getting back into oil painting after, oh God, I think 15 years. And I would not call myself a painter at all. I am a clever monkey using a sharp tool they call a palette knife. Somebody calls it a palette knife. I just call it a sharp thing. And then the stick with a bunch of fibers at the end of it. So the program is designed towards the clever monkey side of things, as opposed to the engineering predictability side of things. I know that's, that might sound like a really small kind of, it might sound like, how do you say it? That might sound like a, not a motif, like a cliche, like just a funny cliche. But in this case, it's one of those cliches that's like, it's incredibly true, and it is core to the program. It is not just by accident that they favor the clever monkey. It is by design that they favor the clever monkey. Because when you first start, you dabble, as Mark said. At first, just people get in and they start to dabble with stuff, and they just experiment. And then they try to get precision, and then we try to get production. Okay, I'm going to try to answer Mark's question about why groups over subtools. Okay, so Mark was asking, why isn't subtools here listed? Why is subtools different than, say, Maya's outliner? And I'll just reiterate, and in fact, why don't somebody else can answer me in this. What is the key purpose of subtools, guys? Key purpose. More polygons. That's all. More polygons. There is no other reason for their existence besides more polygons. They are useful because you can extract and project and merge and split and organize them in minor ways. But the fundamental reason, the only reason they were ever built, because remind you, I was there when they were built. I showed up one day and we had subtools, and I thought, oh, yay. The answer to all these production artists' concerns. They have an outliner like Maya. Yay. But that's not what they got. And that's not what the Pixo dev guys would ever give. They always are going to try to set themselves up for that next home run. They're never going to copy. They're going to try to set themselves up for the next home run. That's why, I mean, you can see it. in the edge loop palette. First there was edge loops. Edge loops were great, but they had problems. So they went to groups loops. Groups loops was great, but they had problems. And then lo and behold, panel loops was the home run. Took them 2 tries, but panel loops is a home run. Okay. Mark, there's a lot of Mark. Actually, there's 2 Marks. Mark Els, I think. Mark Allenbrecht. Yes. All right. Let's get back to this. So I kind of already set you up. That might take a second for the screen to propagate, so I'm going to pause for a second and make sure you can see my screen. I set you up with this whole difference between mass groups and this guy. I set you up for what we want to be doing, which is we want to take panel loops and we want to start to design. And in terms of design, we want to use the clever monkey approach. I know it's a joke, but it's true. We want to use the approach where somebody can sketch. It was something Ofer was telling me once that I think is, that I want to share with you, that I think is really key to understanding how the features work. And if you understand this and you approach every feature with this understanding, you will be much closer to understanding ZBrush. Think of an artist when they sketch. Okay, there are those artists who will say do a contour line that is perfect, right? Like think of, I always forget, I'm going to remember the pronunciation, but somebody always corrects me here. Ingres, or if you're American and you're new to all this, Ingres. So this guy is got just the most beautiful drawings, most beautiful line quality. If you look at his drawings, you'll think that, you know, he does one line and that line is perfect. It just is the most perfect line on the planet. Could never be more perfect. Thanks, Fred. Ryan, please remember, I know somebody named Ong, so I will picture his face right now as I see this word. I'm picturing it, mentally remapping it. So Ong, you would think, would put these beautiful lines that was just perfect when he put his hand down, and I was traditionally trained, and I labored under that mistaken belief for a long time. Of course, he did not lay down the perfect line. He had very, very light lines underneath it, or a very light line underneath it, that he would then kind of follow a little bit more easily. Or you'd have little things that would map it out, and then you would go from one to the other and get his flow. That is not the mindset we would take. Instead, what you would think about, and I'll do this in green, is if you've got a face, somebody who's sketching, somebody who's not trained in all this traditional craziness, which I'm using as a metaphor for Maya. Traditional craziness and methodology is like engineering overhead in Maya. You're trained to think a certain way. ZBrush wants to get at just the artist that's inside everybody. I know it's marketing language, but trust me, there's a crazy amount of thinking developed, focused on that. So here's sketching. Okay, somebody who doesn't know, you know, they'll come down and they'll just put like a bunch of lines down here. And they're like, oh, I'm going to get fine. Where's that line? Okay, I'm coming. I'm going to get that. Where'd that line? Okay, there we go. And then, okay, wait. That bottom of the lip is right there. And then, okay, I'm going to come down. Let me get the corner. What's the corner over here? And is the chin too low? Let me get that. And then I'm going to pull that down. And, okay, underside of the nose. And what is that? And, you know, you just put all these tiny lines down there. What mentally is happening, and this is what what I was being told was mentally happening is in the beginning we'll just place down like these random lines, and then slowly we start to dig in on where that really is. So I'm tracing in white where the highest density of the line is, and the highest density means that this is the area that's been traced over the most, which means it is the most likely area to represent what you see. That white line is something a computer could take. A human could just draw these green lines left, right, and center, and the computer could analyze and say, that average, that area where it's densest, that's the closest to what the artist intended to do. I think my audio dropped out quite a bit there, actually. Lots of lines. You guys hear me okay? Okay. This is how ZBrush thinks about things. It's very loose like this. It's like, okay, let's try this, let's do this, let's try that, let's throw this line down, let's see if we can build this out. They want to get this part of your brain, that is just going to try a million different things until one of them, or until they kind of average out and click. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing clever monkey approach. You just have the whole clever monkey sketching program approach. And now let's get down to business. So the long and the short of it, if you're using this approach, we need to delete the subdivision levels. Doesn't really matter which level we're at. I'm going to delete lower and higher. The long and the short of this, you're going to leave it at its default. You're just going to set some thickness and you're going to go panel loops. Oops, that's not good. I just panel looped my panel loops, which you can do. But it's not going to be pretty. I panel looped my panel loops, and as you know, panel loops creates groups, and there we have more panel loops. And say that 10 times fast after a bunch of eggnog at a holiday party. Fruity loops. I was afraid I was going to mess that up. I was like, can I say all of that? I don't know. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about these, how this works. So first thing is it's created a whole bunch of polygroups. How are we supposed to sculpt this? I've already introduced the primary tool for sculpting this. Anybody remember? Move brush, but there's a key feature. If we go up into the brush palette, let's just select move. I'm going to go down here to auto masking and I'm going to say mask by polygroup. That's the key. Set that to 100. And now you can do things like press Alt and push in, press Alt, push out, you know, on from there. Not only that, but you can also use transpose. Transpose will respect mask by polygroup. And it will only affect the polygroup that this first dot is on. So boom. I'm pressing Shift to conform it. You can also use rotate. There's a lot more I can do right now, but this is where I'm gonna leave it kind of at this initial stage. There we go. Okay, something crazy. I don't know if it's affecting the other side yet. Is okay. We can turn this mask by polygroup off. I can smooth everything. We can divide this. Did not want that to happen. We can also come down here into deformation, and we say polish by feature. Okay, not a lot to really show off in this particular case, but this is the root of it. So you create your groups, you use transpose or move, and then you can do things like polish to kind of adjust it from there. That's the basis. So it's like four items I just gave you, and all of the we can do a lot more after that. But yeah, I would agree with you. T-laws transpose is really the best. Okay, Thomas got help there. And great for hard surfacing. Okay. All right, so now let's get in and start to play a little bit. I'm going to come into this. I'm going to select a plane 3D. I'm going to make it a poly mesh. And I'm looking at the back sides. And I know that from experience, so I just had to rotate it around. Okay, and so we've got some geometry. I'm going to divide it. And now I'm going to focus on polygroups. So I'm going to go, let's go back into the standard brush, let's say, and we want symmetry. Yeah. And let's select this. I want to sharpen that mask. Sharpen mask. Yeah, there we go. That's a little nicer. Let's see if we can put some craziness in there. And anything else that I want to do for that one? I would like this little bar. I would like to see if I can cut a shape in there. Can I do that? I'm going to press Control-Alt. And I just use that square a couple of times. There we go. I just used that square once and twice. We probably could have got away with using roll and roll distance. So let me just try that. I'm going to turn symmetry off. Let's go stroke. I want roll on, and let's set that there. Control. I should have it on dots. I should set roll on for while I'm pressing Control. Much of what I'm showing you right now is not relevant. There's a million ways to do that. And roll was not relevant, really. Okay. Simple design, right? Come in here. Let's edge loop this. That's what we need to do now. So edge loop masked border. Let's delete lower edge loop masked border. So all these parts have individual pieces, but the thing is I want to create something that is inside here. I want to get rid of all of this. So the way I'm going to do that is Control-Shift-Click, and then I'm going to go into polygroups and auto group. And that means that every piece that is separate gets a separate polygroup. The advantage to that is then I can Control-Shift-Click to show everything, then Control-Shift-Click, to show just this border, and then Control-Shift-Click and drag to invert that. And then I go into Geometry, Modify Topology, and I say Delete Hidden. So that little piece is gone. All we have now is our guy right here with some nice little edge loops. Now, do we want to separate out all of these pieces? Maybe. Maybe I want to keep, let's see, that's not good. I need to separate out all of these. So we're not done yet. We need to auto group, and then let's merge similar. Okay, so I'm going to Control-Shift-Click to remove that, Control-Shift-Click, Control-Shift-Click, and then I'm going to group visible. Cool. Maybe I only want these parts to be panel looped. And maybe I want these parts to be separate, and these guys, I want them to be kind of all one piece. I don't know. No, let's panel loop everything. Subtool, where am I going? Geometry, panel loops, Clever Monkey style. Just going to click it and see what happens. It's not enough. I need to increase thickness. Well, that's a little crazy. Oh, that's kind of interesting. You can see the bevel. Bevel is set to 50, so that is that beveled edge. What happens if we do this and we set bevel to 0? Well, it still gets separated, but it's harder to tell. You set that at 100, some craziness happens. Set it back at 50. We were panel looping panel loops and going nuts. You can also adjust this. What's the advantage of doing it this way? Well, we get a form and then we'll have it pull down and we get these really clean separated out pieces. We get these clean extrusions, so to speak. Pieces are still separated out, but they're intersecting each other a little bit. But we get this really interesting lip. And I think that lip is neat. Let's see if I can take advantage of that. Because you notice that this is one polygroup and this is another polygroup. So let's just come into deformation, and I'm just going to polish. Terribly unsexy. Polish of 3 is kind of interesting. I get a nice little bevel. Not a ton, but I get a nice little bevel. Polish by feature. That's really going to be, not so exciting here because the features are using what? What are features? We went through this last week a little bit. But what are features? Polygroups are one thing, and then something else. Creases. Yeah. Features are groups and creases. In this case, it says crisp edges, but that's just code for creases. And creases are in the geometry palette. Part of the older matrix. Where did they move them? Edge loop, modify. Well, they're in here somewhere. Right under crease, Ryan. There you go. So polish is nice, but polish by feature, we've got the groups, so it's really just going to reinforce those groups, which is going to be useful when we do something else, something slightly differently. But in this case, we now have geometry that we can start to mess with. So let's pick our key parts. I'm going to say, let's go move, click, and mask by polygroup. Oh, I'm right on the middle. Let's do green. This from perspective on. Okay, and let's turn this off. And now I need an easy way to select this. Right now everything that's front facing and side facing, they all have separate groups. So I have to go into polygroups and just auto group this thing. That way I can go boom, 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 and I say I want these guys to be lowered. Control, click, and you can lower that one too. Control, click. Ooh, that's going to be painful. I don't want to do that. Let's go W, control, click. All right, and control click, shift. There we go. So it's not pretty, but it's kind of cool. Here's a little dial, little dealio you can put on a guy, and this can become part of your sculpt. You can create tons of these guys, hundreds of variations of these using that simple polyplane, right? If I was smart, and in fact I am smart, I'm going to clone this so that I've got this guy. He's his own separate subtool. I'm going to take this, the working document, and I'm just going to go back in time till I got this before panel loops. And now I can work a little smarter, so I'm going to duplicate that, and why don't I just select this one and rename it and say just source so that we don't mess with him. And now I got one that I can do some variations on. You know, we don't have to have, like, these guys can all be, well, let's do it this way. We've got to go polygroups, auto group, and then I'm going to close, 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 and then group visible. So let's say I don't want those funny little dealios in the center. I'm just going to say group visible. And even though they're in the geometry, and let's just go duplicate. Even though they're in the geometry, it doesn't matter. As soon as I go to edge loop, and let's go into panel loop, it's using the same panel, so that's cool. Same thickness, same polish. I'm going to just go panel loops, and there. That's the geometry I'm getting. Now I can come in, polygroups, auto group, so I get rid of that edging, and now I can go back to my move. So Control, Shift, press down, Control, press up. Okay, don't want to go too high on that one. Oh, we needed some depth. And in this case, we pulled the hole. Let's wait. I pressed undo until I got the edges back because I need the edges for this one. Cool. Okay, polygroups, auto group. Control click. And can I reach it? It's so tiny in there. There we go. But that didn't work. I've got a bit of a conundrum trying to select this interior guy. I'm just going to have to leave that other part invisible. That's why. Somehow they got off register. Okay. Anything else I want to do? That's it. Why are they off register? Is that off register? No. It's just the other one that was. So I'm not going to mess with that right now. But something interesting here, let's see, is there something else we can do? There's more I want to do, guys. Okay. All right. I'm going to do a little more here in a moment, but I want to check in and see how you're doing. Chris is asking, how do you know where the center is so that your mask is at the same location? I didn't know. I had to eyeball it. Clever monkey. Louis, if you press panel loops twice, then that happens. But you're saying how to add more panel loops without destroying the ones already created. What you have to, what you would want to do is basically duplicate the model and then remove the other ones. So you're just focusing on that area that you want. Or, I mean, yeah, it's really, that's what I would do is duplicate it and see if that'll work. That's probably the easiest way to explain it is you get to a certain level and then you just duplicate and you build off of that guy and delete the rest. Okay. Michael saying that I went perspective being on caused the problem, which is possible, but I don't want that to catch us up here. In this case, I would treat that as an acceptable loss. But now let's get in to this panel loops idea, okay, and to edge loops and to groups. And I need to add another tool to your toolbox. So let's just do a quick recap. And where are we at? We're at 2 hours now, so we want to wrap this up. I'll do it in white. Okay, so we've talked a lot about, well, there was a whole lot of Q&A in the beginning. And then in panel loops, we talked a lot about this concept of loops, and we talked a lot about the thinking, not thinking, but like if you were the programmer, you know, this is a programmer perspective. Hey, we have loops. Let's do something with loops. And then we talked about groups and creating the groups with masking. Yeah. Groups at lowest level. Okay. But what I want to get into now, where is it? And I'm losing it. It's in my brain. It's in my brain. Loops. Groups. We've got this guy. Yes. Now I want to get into visibility and creating groups. That follow loops. Groups that follow loops. So what if I want to create a group along the side so I can kind of push this in, this little section. So this area I'm going to outline in red, if I can draw. All of this area, I want to push it in to add some complexity, because that's not something I could do through my normal panel loops process. But now I want to. I can see it. I'm like, oh, there's something interesting here. If I can get some cool shapes going on inside there, that would be great. Then, do I just push these guys in? Do I sculpt it, or what do I do? And as Thomas was saying, you work with visibility. So what we want to do, with perspective off, I'm going to press Control Shift and then press Alt to remove all those top polygons. And then I'm going to do the same for the bottom. But we've got a little bit of a problem. It's really hard to select these guys. Really hard. So this is where these other features come in. Group by normal. Cool. Did it work? Let's go. I want this and this. And not these guys. So I clever monkeyed it up. I got myself most of the way there. And now this is going to become its own part, so group visible. Yes. All right, so we've got that. I'm going to group that another way. And we're a little low. I don't know if you can tell, but this is really just one polygon. It's facing that entire way. Let me select this entire model really by deselecting everything else. And can we just selectively divide this one? That was probably pretty loud. Sorry about that. Yes. So we didn't add a subdivision level, but because parts of the model were hidden and we pressed divide, then we did really what's called a local subdivision. And all we really did is we added one part in here. I keep selecting the wrong piece. Boom, 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 boom. And I put an extra row in there. You can do this one more time if you want another row in here and another row in there. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 4 rows of polygons. Aunt Michael, what are you're killing me with my make things easier, Ryan. Let's go in, slice curve, boom, boom. There's no fun if you guys don't get to see, you know, the brutally painful way that we had to do it back in my day. All right, there you go. You saw both the long and the hard. Ultimately, we ended up coming in using slice. Okay, but now with slice, I need to go through and kill some of these groups. Wow, lots of that. Okay, polygroup, group visible, boom. Okay, and so now the idea is we have a bit of a lip, and then we're going to push all of that in. We're going to see how this works. I'm not quite sure if it's going to work the way I want. Let's try it. So move, control, click. And is it control and shift? I need to get that back to the select rectangle. Yeah, but it's not quite the right tool. Man, there we go. Okay. There, that'll be a little bit easier on your eyes. Scale, control click, LSIM, control, control, and am I adding edge loops? Yes. But, as we saw yesterday, those edge loops, if we come into visibility and we grow, those edge loops don't belong necessarily to the right group. So you have to do exactly what I'm doing here, this two-step of focus on your group, grow it, Control Shift, hide your group, and then group this edge. If we do that right, then we can get some interesting results with polish by feature. Hopefully. Probably need a little bit more geometry. Let's go into Move Brush, Transform, Radial Symmetry. Let's go into Y mode. And let's go into Z mode. There you go. And let's increase that radial count. And I'm just going to press Alt. This is a little bit more on the sculpture side, but that's also one of the advantages we have because we can use polish by features to help us clean that up a bit. Let's turn that radial off or I'm going to go crazy. There you go. Polish by feature works with selective partial visibility, and we've got something to work with from there. A little long-winded, longer than I would have liked that to be. I like that kind of demo to take 5 minutes. But there you go. I'm going through questions right now. Okay. Steve, I could have separated that as a subtool to make it easier. Yes, absolutely. baby bottle, right? But there you go. So the key thing is we have these templates that we can kind of create with poly mesh, these really interesting organic, not organic, but these complex mechanical shapes. You can create, you know, armor this way, but even if you do armor, you'll find that armor needs details. You need these little tiny mechanical pieces, not too dissimilar to this. And so that's why I wanted to show you this today, is because in the demo you'll see armor, and you can see lots of people on YouTube doing armor, but one of the things that everybody kind of falls into is now that you've done armor, now you've got to add all of these details, which a guy like Joseph Drust can do really well. And then what we end up doing is we take stuff like this and we convert it into a brush, an insert mesh brush, right? We're going to create a new one. And once it's an insert mesh brush, then you can just start inserting it into places. Oops. Make sure that you make it an insert mesh brush looking at it straight on. I'm just going to create a new one. And that way it's much easier. Okay, notice though that these are a bit of a distance. I have to kind of push them back into place. Let me show you one of the ways, one of the reasons why that happens. Is it that or is it distance? Because that looks good. That should not be happening if that's the case. Let's put, oh, that's kind of neat. You get a nice little bas-relief style. And we just go from there. It's under modifiers. Here we go. Under modifiers, you actually see the brush. You see the model here, the little piece of geometry. You can actually change that piece of geometry if you wanted to. And there's a lot more that can be done that we can talk about later, next week really. But the key thing that we want to be doing is just getting in and starting to play with panel loops, creating some kind of geometrical design, some kind of helmet. Just get yourself familiar with it. And remember that it is the third out of 2 or 3 different tries to get this. So you can play with the bevel, make that work. Try to make sure that you make a note of delete loops and align loops. That is definitely something that I would put in a test. That kind of technical knowledge is what a certification program's all about. If I said next week for class, by the way, guys, it's just because that's, I'm an artist, you know. What do you want from me, huh? Everything is next week. Everything's, you know, later. If you're watching this during on the 23rd, then there is no Thanksgiving class per se. Have a great weekend at that time. For the Americans in the group, for the rest of you, have a great time anyways. And I'm going through questions right now. Yilang, when will the recording of this be up? You'll send us an email with the link. We'll get it up. I'll ask them to, it has to upload tonight. The office has to leave here shortly. And then I would say tomorrow I'll ask Himanshu to get that up. Oh, we're not, okay. Some guys had some input into why the brush was pulling up. So let's take a look at that. So I just dropped out. I wasn't really concerned about it anymore. But anyways, let's take a look at what Renato says, which is embed. And Georgie says brush depth could be it. You know, and let's clever monkey it. Wow! Absolutely. And then look, you know, you can start adding it to all kinds of things. That's not really the right subtool. In fact, let's undo that. But I love this. Now you can start adding it in and sculpting around that. Come on. Delete lower. There you go. A lot of cool things that can be done with this. This is just a tiny iceberg. Raven is asking, when you create an IM brush, how do you determine which way it's facing? And that is by positioning it. So for example, if I would position it at the side and I create the IM brush, and then I try to use that, notice that it comes at the side. So it'll still calculate the normal of the surface, and let's say the normal is that red line. Well, the model's orientation to that red line will be basically that model's orientation to the canvas. Omar, is going to be 4 tests, I think. Thanks, Jim. Blake. If you want to pronounce in Australia, you would pronounce it as mate. I'm with you on that. I still got to get a correct pronunciation on that. Joshua, I have a question about Projection Master. You mentioned it a bit earlier. Nothing's off topic. You can ask that. But let me wrap up class and then I'll answer that. So all right, guys, let's wrap this up. We're at now about 2.5 hours. Have a great weekend. The rest of this weekend. Next weekend we have it off, although actually the office will be off. I can't guarantee that we're going to be in there checking projects because family commitments. That's a hard time to be in there. So Thanksgiving for us is Thursday. Friday, Saturday we're off. Sunday we are back on in the office on Monday though, and we'll be going from there. So we'll catch up Monday, Tuesday on projects and questions and emails and all of that jazz. All right. So your homework, of course, just keep working through. You can create a panel object. Make sure you watch the lectures. You can create a armor, but I would really like to see little tiny pieces like this as well. Thanks, Mark. Albrecht. Ruse just gave it to you, so hopefully that works. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Eric. T-Laws, when is a test? So after week 5, there will be a test coming. So give us next week. There should be another test. I might give you a little bit more time because it's really the next test is about really about module 5. It's about week 5. Sorry. Thanks, Teresa. Mark. Frederick, T-Laws, Jack. Hey, Jack. Hey, Michael. Happy Thanksgiving, Michael. I hope you have a wonderful time. Wayne. Mark Albrecht, the first test was trying out. Matthew, are you getting emails? Can you email Nate at ZBrush Workshops? He's your mentor on that, and he can help sort out any of that. Huh, Cara, yeah. I have to make sure you're in that loop. Okay. All right. Have a fantastic weekend, guys. I'm going to answer this Projection Master question, if I can find it. There it is. Joshua's Projection Master question. Stick around if you want. Otherwise, I will talk to you in a little bit. All right, Joshua, I haven't watched ahead in the series. Is there a segment dedicated to Projection Master? And there is not. Projection Master, in terms of production use or anything really like that, is just not in use very much. I can give you a quick demonstration right now. Vitaly, Sebastian, they used to use it. Whether they use it now or not, I don't know. But Sebastian Legrain used to use it for some of his ArcViz stuff, and a lot of those features have been replaced by basically the features you saw today. So the ability for transpose to work along the normal, that kind of really ate into a lot of Sebastian's workflow there, because he had to push and pull kind of geometric shapes. So he would use Projection Master with very strict alphas to get clean form. But again, it's largely been supplanted by the transposes work along normal, as well as panel loops. That's a big one that really changed and made a lot of that stuff kind of less relevant. And then the insert meshes, which meant that entire pieces like this piece that we created here, that could actually be like an architectural panel with some kind of relief on it or some kind of decorative pattern sculpted in that you kind of just place via the insert mesh in different areas. And yeah, that's the reason why you haven't seen a lot on it, is because it's largely no longer relevant. In fact, I could tell you that pretty much the stated goal would be everything that you used to be able to do in Projection Master should be able to be done in 3D. That's the stated goal, that Projection Master is too limiting. But let's do it now. We've got a simple sphere. Go into Projection Master. Does not matter what you go into Projection Master with. Let's just activate poly painting. Doesn't matter what you go in, it matters what you come out with. So we can, let's just go Z add, because we're going to sculpt some depth, and I'll go out like that. And you can even put geometry on there, like we can project this piece into it. Let's project along the side so you can see some of the problems with that. And let's go in and try this hook brush. That's going to really screw things up. And then the simple brush. But people really used this brush, or used Projection Master, they used to use it for things like alphas. That's not behaving properly. Let me see, maybe single layer brush is the only one they've really coded well for this. Let's check picker, orientation, and depth. Okay, let's try drag rectangle. There we go. Come on now. I need rotate dot. These are all old. Where did it go? Drag rectangle. Let's come in here to drag rectangle and see if I can get that to twist. But anyways, even if that doesn't work. Yeah, that used to follow the normal as well. Pressing Alt, Control, Shift, not happening. Okay. Oh, let me scroll down. Hey, Catherine, thanks for posting that. Delete loops does work with partial visibility. Okay, so anyways, we used to use Projection Master for sculpting skin details, for example. But here we go. I'm going to pick this up. So I'm going on Projection Master. I want to pick up the sculpting, so I need deformation. I don't care about double-sided. Do yourself a favor and always have fade on. Otherwise, crazy things happen at the borders. And I don't really care about colors, so I'm going to turn that off and pick it up. And there you go. So it faded, and it picked up what it could of the snake hook, and it picked up what it could of this. But it picks up in basically the same thing as a Z project. So you can see that the stretching at the borders here, this is when it's pulling these polygons forward. And also the intensity is so deep. That was one of the problems we used to have, is you couldn't look at it from the side, so you didn't know if you were sculpting too deep. Now, all of this, everything I've just done right now, you can do in 3D much better. So Joshua, let me know if I answered or helped there. Omar is saying that DecoBrush is broken. If it's broken, Omar, I'm not really necessarily going to have a fix, because, like I said, Projection Master has it is not designed for use at this point. And Matthew is mentioning go to Z Classroom because they have some stuff there. Ramon. If I have a low-res polycount tool and I insert a custom insert that is a lot more detailed, get lost due to the tool's polygon count. That's a really good question, Ramon. Let me answer that one. So this model has 140,000 polygons, and Ramon's question is, if I add that 130,000 polygons to this jacket or this vest, which only has 3,000 polygons, what happens? Wrong one. Let me go and select that one. The answer is they maintain themselves as separate objects. So now this little tiny piece was like 130,000, and this piece was 3,000. So now that entire subtool is 133,000. Just gets added to it. Does that help, Ramon? Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Okay, guys. Let me get this all wrapped up, uploading, and get everything positioned for you guys. Have a fantastic Turkey Day. And catch up with all the work. I'm probably not going to send tests out for Thanksgiving. That would be a very unthankful thing for me to do to you guys. So have a fantastic time. I will talk to you when we are back in session. And the content for next term will be released on Monday. That's just automated, so that will be there. Just go ahead and check in on that on Monday. And thank you so much for joining me today, guys. All right, see you, Belarus. Congratulations again. Where are you going to live in San Francisco? Do you know? That place is like some of the most expensive land on the planet. I was thinking of moving the office there one time. San Mateo. Ah, you're getting a cost of living bump. Good. That's awesome. All right. A biento. Au revoir. Fantastic weekend. as Marin turns. And Chris is a neighbor. All right, guys, take it easy. Thanks, Kevin, for putting all the comments through and for helping out. Really great.
Anytime, man.
All right, I'm chilling out the webinar now. Talk to you guys later. See you, Gilling. See you, Michael.
The organizer.